Highway 152 through California's Pacheco Pass is the kind of road most people only remember for its steep grades and sudden turns. But the drivers who've spent their lives out there know better. They know that once the sun goes down and the rain starts to fall, the pass becomes something else entirely. My name is Frank Delgado, and for 35 years I drove a Kenworth across every kind of road this country has to offer, from frozen mountain routes to endless desert highways, and I believed I understood danger. Mechanical failure, bad weather, reckless drivers, those were things you could anticipate. What happened to me on a Tuesday night in 1988 was none of those things. The sky that night wasn't just dark, it looked bruised, swollen with storm clouds that pressed down low over the hills, and the rain came down hard enough to turn the asphalt into a black mirror that reflected nothing but emptiness. I was grinding my way up Pacheco Pass, engines straining against the incline, windshield wipers beating out a steady rhythm, when my high beams caught something standing just beyond the shoulder of the road. At first, my mind struggled to process what I was seeing, because no one should have been out there in that weather. But there she was, perfectly still, right at the edge of the drop-off. It was a woman wearing a wedding dress. Not an old, dirty gown like you'd expect if someone had crashed or wandered out there lost, but bright white silk that seemed to glow in the rain, clinging to her like a second skin, as if the storm couldn't touch it the way it touched everything else. My heart slammed against my ribs, not with fear at first, but with urgency, because I didn't think ghost or legend, I thought tragedy. I thought she'd been in an accident, that maybe her car had gone over the edge, and she was the only one who'd made it out. I hit the air brakes and brought the truck to a stop about 50 yards ahead, waiting for her to run toward me, to scream, to do anything at all. But nothing happened.
The rain kept falling, the wipers kept moving, and the road stayed silent. I grabbed my mag light and stepped out of the cab, and the cold hit me so sharply it felt like teeth sinking into my skin. Every step back toward where she'd been standing felt heavier than the last, and when I reached the spot, she was gone. There were no footprints in the mud, no sign that anyone had been standing there at all, just smooth, rain-soaked ground and the smell of something that made my stomach tighten. Gardenias, sweet, floral, completely out of place on a stormy mountain pass. I went back to my truck and grabbed the CB microphone, my voice shaking as I asked if anyone else was on the road, and after a moment of static, an older voice answered, calm and tired, a driver everyone called the Gray Ghost. He didn't ask where I was or what direction I was heading. He just said, "Tell me you didn't let her in, son." When I told him what I'd seen, he went quiet for a long moment before telling me the story that every old-timer out there knows. Back in 1941, a young woman was left waiting in her wedding dress after her groom never showed up, and sometime that night, she ran into the hills during a storm just like this one. They found the dress days later down in the ravines, but they never found her body. For years, drivers said she'd appear on the roadside looking for a ride, but the Gray Ghost told me that had changed. He said she wasn't just looking to get home anymore. She was looking for someone to join her, to take the place of the man who never came back. I didn't respond. I hung up the mic, put the truck in gear, and drove faster than I ever should have through that pass, refusing to check my mirrors or look toward the shoulder of the road. When the lights of Gilroy finally appeared ahead of me, I felt like I could breathe again, and for one brief, stupid second, I glanced at the passenger side window. There was a wet handprint pressed against the glass, pale and perfect, as if someone had been sitting there quietly the entire time, and before I could even react, it faded away like breath on cold glass. I never drove Pacheco Pass again after that night, because some roads don't forget, some stories don't end, and when it rains hard enough in those hills, there are still drivers who swear they see a white dress standing just beyond the edge of the headlights, waiting.
If the rain brings out the lady, the fog brings out the fleet. And out here in California's Central Valley, fog isn't just weather, it's a living thing. We call it tool fog, the kind that doesn't roll in politely, but drops straight down from the sky like a curtain, thick enough to choke an engine, wide enough to blind a saint. And once you're inside it, the world doesn't shrink, it disappears. No horizon, no shoulder, no sense of up or down. Just you, the hum of your motor, and the hope that the road remembers you're there. My name's Earl Simmons, and I've hauled produce up and down this state for over 20 years. Grapes, lettuce, almonds, tomatoes, anything that needs to get somewhere before it rots. And in all that time, I thought I knew Highway 152 like muscle memory. Every bend east of the San Luis Reservoir, every downgrade, every spot where the wind kicks your trailer just a little harder than it should. But in the winter of 2003, I learned something nobody teaches you in trucking school. I learned that the road has a memory. It was just past midnight, the kind of shift where the radio stops talking back to you, and the dash lights feel like the only stars left in the universe. The forecast mentioned patchy fog, nothing serious. I'd heard that lie before. I was running light, no rush, maybe 50 miles an hour, when it happened. 1 second, I could see the glow of the distant refinery lights, and the next second, I drove straight into a wall. Not fog rolling, not mist creeping, a solid whiteout like someone dropped a sheet over the windshield. Instinct kicked in, hazards on, foot off the gas, easing it down to 10 miles an hour, knuckles locked around the wheel, praying I wouldn't get rear-ended by someone blasting through blind. The fog swallowed sound, too. Everything felt padded, muted, unreal. And that's when I saw them in my mirrors. At first, I thought it was glare, my own lights bouncing back at me. But then the shapes held steady. Round yellow headlights, dim, old glass, nothing modern, floating low in the fog. And behind them, shadows. A convoy easing up like it had been following me for miles. 4 trucks pulling into the passing lane with slow confidence. And when their bodies came into view, my stomach dropped. These weren't modern rigs, these were relics. 1940s flatbeds and tankers, long noses, split windshields, rusted frames that should have been screaming apart, but they were silent. No diesel rattle, no tire hiss, no vibration through the air, just massive shapes sliding past me like they weren't touching the road at all, like sharks moving through milk. And as the lead truck crept up alongside my cab, the temperature inside my rig collapsed. The air turned sharp and biting. My breath fogged up the windshield from the inside, and despite the heater blasting, cold crawled up my arms and into my chest. I looked over, against every instinct I had, and that's when I saw the driver.
He sat stiff behind the wheel, wearing a flat cap, his face gray, not pale but ashy, like something left behind after a fire. his eyes sunken and heavy, and the worst part was that he wasn't watching the road. He was looking straight at me, not with anger, not with menace, but with a kind of exhaustion that made my heart sink. And then he nodded, slow and deliberate, the kind of nod you give another man when you both understand something terrible without saying it, like we were already dead, and acknowledging it was just good manners. The rest of the convoy followed him past my cab, 4 silent ghosts sliding ahead, and the moment the last one cleared me, the cold vanished. The fog thinned just enough for me to see red taillights dissolving into white. And then there was nothing. No trucks, no sound returning, no explanation, just empty road and my own pulse pounding in my ears. I pulled over at the first place I thought might be a shoulder and sat there shaking with my hazards blinking uselessly into the fog, telling myself it was fatigue, stress, imagination, anything that wouldn't cost me my license if I said it out loud. I finished that run at sunrise and buried the memory as deep as I could, but years later, curiosity clawed its way back. That stretch of road never left my mind, so I started digging. Old county records, archived newspapers, microfilm that smelled like dust and time, and eventually I found it. A small clipping from 1952, a 5-truck pileup in the Tule fog on that exact stretch east of the San Luis Reservoir. Fuel tanks ruptured, fire everywhere. 6 drivers burned alive in their cabs before anyone could reach them. Witnesses saying the fog swallowed the sound of the crash. And I stared at that article for a long time, at the photo of those old flatbeds and tankers twisted together, and I thought about that nod, that unbearable sadness in a man who should have been gone for half a century. And that's when I understood. They weren't haunting the road to scare anyone. They weren't warning us. They were still working, still driving, still running that route, because that's what they were doing when the world went white and never came back. They're still trying to make their delivery. And now, when the Tule fog rolls in, I don't care about deadlines or loads or money. I pull over and wait, because I'm terrified that one day, instead of watching them pass, I'll feel my truck ease forward on its own, like the road remembers me too, and I look in the mirror and see those yellow headlights lining up behind me, and I won't be able to pull out, I won't be able to stop, and I'll find myself at the back of their line, driving silently into the fog on a road that never forgets.
If you've ever driven through the back highways of California at night, you already know the road doesn't feel empty. It feels like it's watching you. Fatigue does strange things to the mind, especially when the engine hum becomes a lullaby and the white lines start breathing. Long-haul drivers call it highway hypnosis, that dangerous place where reality slips just enough to let something else crawl in. For Maria Lopez, that line was crossed somewhere near Pacheco Pass, and what she found waiting for her wasn't a dream. My name is Maria Lopez, and this is the night I stopped at a diner that wasn't there. In 2015, I was hauling a full load of electronics from Oakland down toward Texas, running on a tight deadline and bad luck. A major wreck shut down the I-5, and dispatch rerouted me through Highway 152, a stretch most truckers avoid after dark. By the time the clock on my dash hit 2 a.m., my eyes burned like they were packed with sand, my hands were stiff on the wheel, and every mile marker felt like an insult. There's nothing out there at night, just rolling black hills, fog that moves like it's alive, and long patches with no exits, no lights, no mercy. I needed coffee or sleep, preferably both, and I didn't care where it came from. That's when I saw the glow. It wasn't bright, not like modern LEDs or truck stop signs that scream for attention. This was softer, older, flickering unevenly like it was struggling to stay alive. A neon sign rose out of the darkness on my right, buzzing faintly through the fog. Gill's Diner. The letters blinked out of rhythm, the G cutting in and out like a bad pulse. I slowed without thinking. It looked wrong and comforting at the same time, like a photograph pulled out of another decade and taped onto the present. Rusted gas pumps leaned at odd angles near a gravel lot, their paint flaking like dead skin. The building itself was small, squat, and tired, with fogged windows and a single door glowing yellow from inside. I checked my GPS out of habit. Nothing. No marker, no business, no side road, just empty black map. That should have been my warning. Instead, I pulled in. The gravel crunched under my tires too loudly, echoing in the quiet, and when I shut off the engine, the silence rushed in so fast it made my ears ring. No insects, no wind, just dead air. When I opened the door, the smell hit me first. Old grease, burned coffee, and damp pavement, like the place had been soaked in decades of spilled oil and never fully dried. Inside, the diner felt frozen in time. Red vinyl booths cracked with age lined the walls, and a long counter stretched across the room, spotless to an unnatural degree. No radio, no refrigerator hum, no clinking dishes. Behind the counter stood an old woman in a faded pink uniform, her gray hair pulled tight into a bun. She was wiping the counter in slow, perfect circles, over and over, even though there wasn't a speck of dirt to be seen. She didn't look at me when I walked in, didn't say hello, didn't smile. I sat at the counter anyway, my boots loud against the tile. She reached for a mug without a word and poured coffee from a glass pot that looked older than me. The liquid was thick and black, almost oily, and when I took a sip, it tasted burnt and bitter, like ash mixed with metal. It was awful, but it was hot, and it kept my eyes open. I tried to make small talk, asked her how long the diner had been open, but she never answered. She just kept wiping, her rag moving in the same endless circles. The longer I sat there, the heavier the room felt. The silence wasn't peaceful, it pressed down on my chest. I became painfully aware of the booths behind me, dark and empty, yet somehow crowded, like I wasn't alone at all. The feeling crawled up my spine, that instinct truckers learn to trust more than mirrors or gauges. Something was wrong. My gut didn't whisper, it screamed, "Leave, now." I threw a $5 bill on the counter, the sound of it hitting the surface too loud in the stillness, and stood up so fast my stool scraped the floor like a gunshot. The old woman finally stopped wiping. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her head and looked at me. Her eyes were pale and flat, like cloudy glass, and for a split second I had the overwhelming sense that she knew exactly who I was, where I was going, and what would happen if I stayed. I didn't wait to see her smile. I walked out, nearly running, my breath fogging the air. The moment I crossed the threshold, the night rushed back in. Wind, distant engine noise, the low groan of the hills. I climbed into my rig, fired the engine, and pulled back onto the highway without looking back. A mile down the road, curiosity got the better of fear. I glanced into my side mirror, expecting to see the diner's neon glow shrinking into the fog. There was nothing. No lights, no gravel lot, no sign, just darkness and the black outline of the hills like teeth against the sky. I told myself it was exhaustion, a hallucination, my brain filling in gaps with old memories and roadside myths. I drove until dawn, afraid that if I stopped again, it would come back. The next day, at a truck stop in Bakersfield, I told the story like a joke, laughing too hard, pretending it didn't still crawl under my skin. An older driver sitting nearby went quiet when I mentioned Gil's Diner. He stared at me for a long moment, his face draining of color. Then he said my name even though I'd never told him. Maria. Gil's burned down in 1974. Electrical fire. Happened late at night. Gil and his wife never made it out. He leaned closer, lowering his voice like the walls might be listening. They say the diner still opens sometimes, usually when the fog is thick and drivers are running on empty. Most people don't stop. Some do. I asked him what happened to those people. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're lucky you didn't ask for a second cup. Folks who stay for a refill at Gil's, they usually end up on the menu of the missing." I laughed it off again, but that night, lying in my sleeper cab, I smelled burnt coffee and old grease, and I dreamed of pale eyes watching me from dark booths. To this day, I won't drive Highway 152 after midnight, and I never drink coffee that tastes like ash. Because somewhere in the fog, Gil's neon sign is still flickering, waiting for the next tired driver to mistake hunger for safety and stop at a place that should have stayed burned to the ground.
Most truckers have a rule. No riders, no exceptions. Because the road teaches you early that some lessons cost lives. And back in 1999, I thought I had learned all of them already. Thought I was untouchable, young, cocky, driving a Peterbilt 379 polished so bright the moon bounced off the chrome like it was showing off for me. Eastbound on Highway 152 with the radio humming low and my head still burning from the fight I'd had with my wife before leaving. The kind of argument that sits in your chest long after the words stop flying. And that stretch of road was empty in a way that makes time feel slower, darker, heavier, until I saw him standing under a single flickering streetlight near an old turnout, not waving, not signaling, just standing there like he'd been placed deliberately, a kid maybe 20 years old in a thin jean jacket with a backpack hanging off one shoulder, shivering hard enough I could see it even from the cab. And I told myself to keep driving because every instinct I had was screaming not to stop. But guilt has a way of sounding like compassion, so I slowed down and pulled over, thinking I was being a good Samaritan. And the moment he climbed into the passenger seat, the smell hit me. Not sweat or road dirt, but damp earth, heavy and sweet like freshly turned soil, like a grave after rain. And it made my stomach knot before he even said thank you, his voice calm and polite in a way that didn't match the cold night or his shaking hands. And when I finally looked at his face, that's when I noticed his eyes, because they didn't belong there. His face was young, but his eyes were ancient, deep and tired and knowing, like they had been open far longer than the rest of him. And he said he was headed for Flagstaff for family trouble, said it in a way that shut down questions. So I put the truck back in gear and drove, telling myself to relax, telling myself I was imagining things, until the silence got thick and he spoke again without looking at me and said I shouldn't have fought with Sarah before I left, using my full name like it was familiar
familiar, and my hands locked on the wheel so hard the truck drifted before I corrected it because I hadn't told him my name, hadn't told anyone that night, hadn't told anyone about the argument or the way my wife cried in the kitchen. And before I could say anything, he calmly pointed to the floorboard and told me my emergency cash taped under the seat was safe and I wouldn't need it tonight. And that's when fear finally took control, and I slammed the brakes, hazards clicking, heart pounding, yelling at him to get out while my whole body shook. And he didn't argue or panic, just nodded once like this was always how it was supposed to end, and stepped down into the darkness, leaving that graveyard smell hanging in the cab as I floored it and tore down the highway without looking back, telling myself it was coincidence stacked on coincidence, until 5 miles later the thought hit me so hard I had to slow down again because I never unlocked the passenger door, and ahead of me was the curve by the aqueduct, the one he'd warned me about in a passing comment as he got out, telling me to take it slow even though the road looked dry. And when my headlights swept across it, I saw the black ice spread across the lane like glass, invisible and deadly, and I crept through it, knowing if I'd been going full speed, I'd be dead, sitting at the bottom of a canal. And I told myself then that he wasn't a killer, that he was a warning, that whatever he was, he'd saved my life. But relief doesn't last long when questions start piling up, and the road keeps going.
I didn't stop thinking about him after that night. Not when I reached my drop, not when I drove home, not even when I apologized to my wife and held her tighter than I ever had before, because something about those eyes stayed with me. And over the years, I heard stories at truck stops that made my blood run cold. Different drivers, different highways, but the same hitchhiker. Always young, always out of place, always knowing things he shouldn't, showing up before accidents, before blowouts, before deadly curves and bridge collapses. And some drivers said he disappeared mid-sentence. Some said he was never in the passenger seat when they looked back. And one old-timer swore he picked him up in the 70s and again in the 90s and again just a few years ago, and he never aged a day. And that's when I realized the worst part wasn't that he could unlock a door that was never opened, or know secrets no stranger should know. It was that he only ever appeared when something bad was about to happen, like a marker placed on the road. And I started to wonder how many times he'd been too late, how many wrecks and roadside memorials marked places where he never stood under a streetlight waiting. And one night, years later, long after I'd sworn off picking up riders forever, I was parked at a rest stop and saw a familiar figure standing near the edge of the lot. Same jacket, same posture, same impossible eyes staring straight at my cab, and my heart froze because this time I didn't stop. I locked the doors and drove away, and in my mirror I saw him raise his hand slowly, not waving, just watching me leave. And the next morning I passed a mangled wreck twisted around a guardrail a mile down the road where I would have been if I'd stayed. And that's when the truth finally settled in, heavy and cold, that maybe he isn't there to save everyone. Maybe he only warns the ones who can still change something, who still have something worth going back for. And that's why I don't pick up hitchhikers anymore. Not because I'm afraid they'll hurt me, but because one day I might look over and see those old ancient eyes again and realize he's not there to warn me this time. He's there to let me know my road is finally about to end.
Technology is supposed to be clean, logical, obedient. It listens to commands, follows code, shuts down when you tell it to. That's what I believed in 2011, back when my name was Jack Marino, and my pride and joy was a 2010 Freightliner that had more processors than the laptop I carried in my duffel bag. That truck wasn't just steel and rubber, it was a rolling brain, tracking my hours, monitoring engine health, logging every mile with ruthless precision. I trusted it more than I trusted people. That night on Highway 152, sitting at the Casa de Fruta truck stop, I was relaxed, halfway through a bad cup of coffee, staring out the window at my rig parked under the sodium lights. The dash was dark, the engine cold, the doors locked. Then the headlights flashed. Not flickered, not glitched, flashed, deliberate and intentional. Before my brain could catch up, the engine turned over with a deep mechanical growl, the kind that vibrates through your chest, and my Freightliner rolled forward like it had just been given a destination. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor, watching in disbelief as my truck pulled cleanly out of the parking spot, signaled left like a model citizen, and merged onto the highway. The cab was empty, no silhouette, no movement behind the glass, just a machine driving itself into the dark. Panic finally kicked in when my buddy Dave saw my face and followed my stare. We didn't talk, we ran. His rig was already idling, and within seconds we were barreling on to the 152, chasing my own truck through Pacheco Pass. The speedometer crept past 70, then 80, but that Freightliner stayed ahead, always the same distance, like it knew exactly how far to let us get. It handled the curves like a veteran driver, braking smoothly, signaling every lane change, respecting every turn as if it had hauled freight on that road for decades. Watching it felt wrong in a way I still can't fully explain, like seeing a corpse breathe or hearing your own voice speak words you didn't say. This wasn't chaos, this was control, cold and experienced, like something old had slipped into the machine and remembered how to work the gears. The truck finally slowed near the reservoir, easing onto a lonely shoulder where the fog hangs low and the water reflects the moon like a dead eye. Dave stopped behind it, and for a long moment neither of us moved. The engine idled, steady and calm, like it was waiting. I grabbed a tire iron, every instinct screaming hijacking, trap, something human and violent. I approached the cab slow, heart pounding loud enough to drown out the hum of the engine. The doors were still locked. I checked twice. The seat inside was empty and cold, the steering wheel untouched, no warmth, no smell of sweat or breath. When I shut the engine down, it obeyed instantly, like it had just finished a job. Later, back at the stop, I plugged into the diagnostics, desperate for a rational answer. The digital logs showed a completed trip, miles driven, turns recorded, speed perfectly regulated. But the driver's seat sensor read 0 the entire time. No weight, no presence, just a clean, impossible record of movement without a human hand. That's when the fear settled in, slow and heavy. Highway 152 has a history, wrecks buried in the hills, drivers who never made it home, old hands who knew that road before dashboards glowed and computers watched. I realized then that some roads don't forget how they were used. The machines we build learn from us, absorb our habits, our instincts, our ghosts. That night taught me technology doesn't replace the past, it carries it forward. And sometimes, when the night is quiet and the road is empty, the highway itself takes the wheel, just to remember what it felt like to drive one last time. For tonight's final tale, we venture into the chilling world truckers whisper about but rarely admit, the phenomenon they call the echo. It's said that on the quietest nights along Highway 152, the CB radio doesn't pick up the living. It reaches out to the last desperate words of those the road has claimed. Voices trapped between this world and the next, echoing through time. I was heading west, rolling past the stretch where the infamous 1952 Convoy crash occurred. My rig humming softly under the tires, the night thick with fog that seemed to swallow the beams of my headlights. My radio sat on scan, just a little background noise to keep the isolation of the highway from driving me mad, when suddenly the static parted and a voice bled through. It wasn't the scratchy, familiar chatter of truckers swapping road tips. It was hollow, metallic, like it had been funneled through a long, rusted pipe. "Breaker 19, I can't see the car. I'm losing the air pressure," it gasped, raw with panic, every syllable vibrating with decades-old fear. And then another voice joined, urgent, trembling. "Hold it steady, Bill. The fog is too thick." My stomach sank as the reality hit me. I wasn't listening to a recording. I was witnessing the crash as it unfolded, a live transmission from the past. I slammed my hand to the mic, trying to warn them, to stop them, to save them, but my radio refused to respond. I was invisible to them, a phantom stuck between the now and the then. The sounds escalated, the screech of twisting metal, a deafening roar of fire, and the horrifying finality of silence. And in that silence, the road seemed to breathe around me, heavy, patient, and utterly merciless. Just as I dared to hope it was over, a whisper crawled back through the static, slower this time, deliberate, a voice that seemed to know the very bones of my truck, reciting my license plate number as if it had been waiting for me all along. "See you soon, driver. The road is waiting." My hands trembled as I cut the radio feed, the sudden absence of sound almost louder than the chaos before, leaving me with nothing but the eerie hum of my engine and the oppressive darkness of the 152, a silence so thick it pressed against my chest like a living thing. Every shadow along the shoulder seemed to flicker with movement. Every glint of fog or reflective paint on a sign whispered that the voices hadn't really left, that they were merely paused, waiting for another lonely driver to stumble into their trap. I haven't touched that radio since. Even the thought of it now sends a shiver crawling down my spine, because out here, in the dead stretches of asphalt, where fog clings like a second skin, the silence is suffocating, but the voices, the echoes of men long gone, are something far worse, something that knows your name, your rig, your route, and patiently waits for the moment when the road will claim you too, a never-ending broadcast of terror that you can never, ever tune out.